It's a time in our service where we collect an offering. To those attending MCC Boston, to our YouTube page, you too can participate by going to our website at mccboston.org and clicking on the donate button there for that purpose. Thank you for being a part of our church family. Members and friends of MCC Boston, this Easter, our Boston church will be taking a special offering to support the work of the Global Justice Institute of MCC. For those who don't know, the Global Justice Institute performs the international justice work of our denomination. So what will the money be used for? Our donation this Easter will help our queer-focused work in Eastern Europe to continue. Among other actions, our office in Lithuania is now firmly established, streamlining our efforts in moving queer folk out of Belarus. Our gift this year will support our ongoing legal case in Romania on behalf of queer family rights. Our work thus far has allowed our case to move forward, and it's currently slated to be heard by the European Court of Human Rights. Along with this action, the Global Justice Institute will be presenting our case before the United Nations in Geneva. Our offering this year will continue the support of MCC's Queer Community Center in Kenya. Our presence there is still so urgently needed, as East Africa has experienced the worst drought it's seen in over 40 years. As a result, the political and religious leaders have been fueling the flames of homophobia and transphobia in an attempt to deflect the general population's attention away from the government's lackluster response to the crisis. These are just a few examples of the work of the Global Justice Institute. By participating in these ministries, MCC Boston not only aids in the liberation of marginalized people, but also contributes to spreading the message of God's all-inclusive love. So over the next few weeks, please budget your money in a way that enables you to support this important work while also maintaining your weekly giving to this, your home church. For now, as the basket is presented,
tonight's Bible reading is from the Gospel of John, chapter 11, verses 1 through 45. Bear with me, it's very long. The death of Lazarus. A man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. This was the same Mary who massaged the Lord's feet with aromatic oils and then wiped them with her hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was sick. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Master, the one you love so very much is sick." When Jesus got the message, he said, "This sickness is not fatal. It will become an occasion to show God's glory by glorifying God's own." Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. But oddly, when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed on where he was for 2 more days. After the 2 days, he said to his disciples, "Let's go back to Judah." They said, "Rabbi, you can't do that. The Jews are out to kill you, and you're going back?" Jesus replied, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in daylight doesn't stumble, because there's plenty of light from the sun. Walking at night, he might very well stumble, because he can't see where he is going." He said these things and then announced, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. I'm going to wake him up." The disciples said, "Master, if he's gone to sleep, he'll get a good rest and wake up feeling fine." Jesus was talking about death, while his disciples thought he was talking about taking a nap. Then Jesus became explicit. "Lazarus died, and I am glad for your sakes that I wasn't there. You're about to be given new grounds for believing. Now let's go to him." That's when Thomas, the one called the twin, said to his companions, "Come along. We might as well die with him." When Jesus finally got there, he found Lazarus already 4 days dead. Bethany was near Jerusalem, only a couple of miles away, and many of the Jews were visiting Martha and Mary. sympathizing with them over their brother. Martha heard Jesus was coming and went out to meet him. Mary remained in the house. Martha said, "Master, if you'd been there, my brother wouldn't have died. Even now I know that whatever you ask of God will be given to you." Jesus said, "Your brother will rise up." Martha replied, "I know that he will be raised up into the resurrection at the end of time." "You don't have to wait to the end. I am right now, resurrection and life. The one who believes in me, even though he or she dies, will live. And everyone who lives believing in me does not ultimately die at all. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Master. All along I have believed that you are the Messiah, sent from God, who comes into this world." After saying this, she went out to her sister Mary and whispered in her ear, "The teacher is here, and he's asking for you." The moment she heard that, she jumped up and ran out to him. Jesus had not yet entered the town, but was still in a place where Martha had met him. When her sympathizing Jewish friends saw Mary run off, they followed her, thinking she was on her way to the tomb to weep there. Mary came to where Jesus was waiting and fell at his feet, saying, "Master, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her sobbing, and the Jews with her sobbing, a deep anger welled up within him. He said, "Where did you put him?" "Master, come and see," they said. Now Jesus wept. The Jews said, "Look how deeply he loved him." Others among them said, "Well, if he loved him so much, why didn't he do something to keep him from dying? After all, he opened the eyes of a blind man." Then Jesus, the anger again welling up within him, arrived at the tomb. It was a simple cave in the hillside with a slab of stone laid against it. Jesus said, "Remove the stone." The sister of the dead man, Martha, said, "Master, by this time there's a stench. He's been dead for 4 days." Jesus looked at her in the eyes. "Didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" Then to the others, "Go ahead, take away the stone." They removed the stone. Jesus raised his eyes to heaven and prayed, "I am grateful that you have listened to me. I know you always do listen. But on account of this crowd standing here, I've spoken so that they might believe that you sent me." Then he shouted, "Lazarus, come out!" And he came out, a cadaver wrapped from head to toe with a kerchief over his face. Jesus told them, "Unwrap him and let him loose." That was a turning point for many of the Jews who were with Mary. They saw what Jesus did and they believed him.
I have learned that it is not easy to say something from the pulpit that will get you in trouble with the MCC. I've said a lot of things here that would have me declared anathema at nearly all of the other religious communities I've been a part of. And I love that about this church. And yet, what I am about to say may be a bridge too far even for the MCC. Sometimes Jesus pisses me off. I mean, I love him and he's the ground and source of my being and my life is dedicated to him, but I still get a little angry at him sometimes. Sometimes the stories about him seem a little harsh. Sometimes I don't know if I like the things he says and does. This isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes the best lessons for me come from the times when I am utterly vexed by Jesus and have to spend a long time thinking about it. Sometimes my best sermons start when I have a bone to pick with God or Jesus or the text itself. Like now, I have some bones to pick with this text. I'll start small. In the final few verses of the pericope, when Jesus has performed the miracle, it says that Lazarus came out of the tomb. And then it says that his arms and legs were still bound in burial clothes. And then to further make the point, Jesus tells the crowd to unbind him after he's already come out of the tomb. So how did he come out of the tomb in the first place? His legs were bound. Did he bunny hop? Did he levitate? Was there some crude, absurdist Monty Python scene in which all those gathered stood aghast, listening to the sound of the bound Lazarus, grunting and panting, slowly rolling himself onto the ground and out of the tomb? Seriously, how did this happen? Why doesn't John do a better job of explaining it? And why is no one else talking about it? I read my usual 2 commentaries plus 2 devotions plus an extra commentary that I just happened to have at home. And only one of any of these sources addressed the fact that Lazarus emerged from the tomb, somehow still wrapped tightly in his burial shroud. And their explanation was that Jesus' words somehow magically lifted Lazarus up and floated him out of the tomb. But then that wouldn't really be Lazarus coming out, would it? That would be Jesus bringing Lazarus out. And yes, I am fully aware that I am speaking skeptically of the suggestion that Jesus' words caused his friend to magically float out of the tomb, while completely accepting without question that Jesus' words magically realived his friend after 4 days of decomposition, and that doesn't make any sense either, but here we are. Another bone to pick is, why is Jesus so pissed off? And for all of my criticism of the message, they got this right where most translations don't. Most of them will try to soften it and say Jesus was disturbed or deeply moved, but no, he was angry. All of the commentaries say he was angry. That's what the word meant. And I don't understand. Some scholars suggest that it's frustration at the lack of faith in the crowd, but I don't think that's really fair. There are very few rules in life that are always true, but one of the few is that death happens to all of us and it's final. Why should any of those gathered think that it would be different this time? Yes, they have seen Jesus perform wonders, sometimes great wonders. But still, nothing even close to the same level is undeading a guy. That's another ballgame. That's something that is completely at odds with our understanding of the way the world works. And I get that Jesus wants people to have faith in him, but I have a hard time believing that he would become infuriated because no one but just expected him to de-decease someone, an act that had literally never been performed anywhere by anyone. But then if it's not that Jesus is pissed off about, then what else could it be? Why would Jesus be so furious in the midst of a crowd of people crying about their dead friend? How does that make sense on any level? If I saw a normal person getting all ticked off because a bunch of people around them were sad that their friend died, I would think that person is in need of serious help. And this is not a normal person, this is freaking Jesus. Most of the rest of my frustrations here are pretty much the same as everyone in the text. But why did Jesus wait so long? He got the news and just chilled out for 2 days, then started making the trip. And yes, Lazarus was already dead by the time Jesus got the news. But he could have saved all of those people 2 days of grief. 2 days of never knowing when you're going to suddenly start crying again. 2 days of watching the clock tick more slowly than you've ever seen when all you want is to get through the day. 2 days of waking up and remembering again just how wrong everything has gone. Speaking purely out of compassion for the bereaved, I think maybe those people could have been relieved of their mourning a little sooner. And what was Jesus even doing with those 2 days? Did he have some important business to attend to before he left town to literally resurrect the dead? It's perplexing. Also, and this particular bone largely involves a theological idea that I don't subscribe to, but Jesus tells his apostles, "For your sake, I am glad I was not there before Lazarus died, so that you may believe." Now again, this isn't really an idea I agree with in the first place, but if you ask a lot of Christians, belief in Jesus is the thing that saves us from eternal torment, right? It's generally accepted. Thankfully, I haven't heard a lot of it here, but in most Christian communities, the idea is that you have to believe in Jesus to attain salvation. And if you don't, well, there's some kind of general nastiness that'll happen later to you. And there is some pretty solid textual evidence to make that case. The same Gospel of John has Jesus telling us that no one enters the kingdom of heaven but through him. Now that may mean other things, but it's certainly no stretch to think that it might mean that one must believe in Jesus specifically. And here we have not only the apostles, not only Mary and Martha and Lazarus himself, but we also have all these gathered mourners who get to witness Jesus alive again someone. And I'm just saying, I think it'd be a lot more likely to believe in Jesus if I had watched him recompose a guy. It feels like that would make faith a little easier. I mean, I have faith now, but I would really have faith if I watched a dead man bunny hop out of a tomb in his funeral wrappings. Full disclosure, I would first keep my distance in case he's a zombie, but after that had been established, I think I'd probably have a lot of faith in the guy who said a couple words and then a corpse rolled out of its own grave. And if faith is the thing that saves one from damnation, then there are an awful lot of people in this scene who have an unfair advantage. And I don't like that. I don't like line cutters. I don't like people who drive past everyone in the right turn lane and then merge at the last second. I don't like it when people cheat the system. And if the system is believe in Jesus or you don't get to go to heaven, and a bunch of people got to watch Jesus reanimate a dude, but the rest of us don't, that's an unfair advantage. I'm just saying. But in reality, all of these bones that I have to pick with this text are just propping up my biggest beef with the story, which is why this time? Why just this once did one guy get to be dead for 4 days and then be alive some more? Why did this one particular group of mourners get to say all the things they regretted never saying and give the embraces they wish they could give one more time? Why was there this one reprieve and then never again? I can accept that the time comes for everyone to die. I don't like it, but I can get around to accepting it. But what is harder to accept is that the time comes for everyone except this one dude. He got a do-over because Jesus really liked him. And why him? When there are so many other deaths in the world that are all permanent. Children with disease, parents of young babies, innocents suffering cruelty in their last moments. I mean, every single murder victim of every single genocide in history is dead forever, no take-backsies. But Lazarus gets another go because Jesus wanted to do him a solid. And here's where I get into trouble, because that thing I said about how some of my best sermons come from a frustration with the text, that only works if I can find a resolution. If I can find some bright note to end on, or at least some solace through the difficulty that we can't avoid. And I don't think I can do that here, because I'm still just pissed off at all the death in the world that just had to be permanent when this one random dude got to be temporarily dead. Now, full disclosure here. I have been trying to convince my therapist for years that God or destiny or the universe loves to play little silly jokes on me. So case in point, I had to write a sermon about Lazarus on the same day I had to go to a funeral. And this was a death that didn't even hit me particularly hard. It was a former coworker. I had a lot of respect for the guy. He was a friend, but not a close one. But still, I spent a day steeped in all of the rituals we have of death and all of those moments. I experienced what everyone in this text experiences: the tearful gathering, the apologies that we have to see each other under these circumstances, the endless reviewing of the details of the death, trying to make sense of it. The nostalgia that turns to sadness, the wondering if things might have been different if only, the guilt at not reaching out more when we had the chance, I just happened to have been doing morning things all day and then got home to write 5 pages about the one time it was undone. The one time all of that grief gave way to rejoicing and reunion. And I'm just flat out envious of that. I want to have it all taken back, even just once. And death is no stranger to me. This was but far from my first. It feels like I've had more than my fair share of friends and family, ranging from murder to literally nothing. And beyond that, I work in a job which basically guarantees that I will lose about half a dozen clients a year. When my boss calls me on my days off, I don't ask what's up, I ask who is it. So maybe I'm just too deep in all of this at this moment, or just too deep in it in general, and maybe I've just been through it a lot. And maybe I'm also just pissed off on behalf of all of the other people who've been through it a lot. And maybe I'm just pissed off about death at all. Maybe that's what Jesus is pissed off at too, and if so, well, I agree, bud. Good point. In any case, I can't find a way to make this one right. I've been reading and writing and thinking, and I haven't uncovered an angle that makes me feel better about the text, and the more I look into it, the more pissed off I get. But the one revelation that I did get out of this experience is I remembered the next thing that happens in this story. It is generally understood that in the Synoptic Gospels, it's the cleansing of the temple that led the religious elites to condemn Jesus. In John, though, this miracle is the final straw. This is the one thing Jesus does that causes the religious elites to say enough is enough. And I am so sure that for at least some of them, it must have occurred to them to question this resurrection the same way I do. To wonder why it was this guy and not someone they loved. Why couldn't it have been another person? In this time and place, death would have walked that much closer to everyone. There is no doubt that the men who condemned Jesus to die had also lost ones they loved. And I'm sure some of them also wondered if this Jesus could undo the powers of death, why couldn't he undo it for me? Why couldn't it be my wife, my daughter, my brother, my friend? Why does this man claim to have defeated death when I still feel it sting so sharply? Those men took that anger, the same anger that I have, and they killed with it. And as much as I am very frustrated still, I cannot let myself go down that road. I'm not crazy about the other road, where Jesus gives someone a reprieve once as a cool party trick and then everyone else just keeps dying. But it's much better to do that than let my bitterness consume me until I'm ready to do death's work for it. So there's not much I have to offer at the end of this by the way of hope, except a new hope was experienced by a select few people a long time ago, and if there was hope for them, then I guess there must be hope somewhere for all of us. In the meantime, okay, death was undone once, 2,000 years ago, but for everyone else, we still live in it. And it keeps happening, and it hasn't unhappened yet other than that time. All I have to say is there's nothing about death that makes any sense. There's no reason or logic to it. There's no fairness, and it would be foolish to expect that. I learned this lesson at a pretty young age, and I've kept learning it. And it's also not fair that Lazarus is the only one who gets a second chance, that everyone's death is permanent except one guy. But I certainly wouldn't subject his mourners to more grief just so I'm not alone in mine. I regret that that moment of utter relief and jubilation that they must have felt can't be more universal than it is. I regret that we don't all get that, or at least don't get it yet. But this is our lot, at least for now. I have full faith that it won't be our reality forever, that someday death will be a passing shadow, and we'll wonder why we felt so strongly about it. What were we so scared and angry about? In the meantime, though, if anyone gets to have that undone in the present, I'm not going to try and take it away from them. Thank you.